And welcome everybody to a very special event because I love having Olga Lautman with me. Olga, how are you? It's great to see you. Everyone knows you from the Trump Tyranny Tracker and Unmasking Russia. How are you doing, Olga?
I am good. Welcome 2026, I guess. Or maybe
We
we
made it here. That's a
or
good
maybe we
thing.
should try to make it backpedal
Can we
to
reverse time?
2025.
It's a little bit like that. Things just get more and more complicated today. We're going to cover the big news happening today. There's a security conference happening right now around Ukraine. It involves the European leaders that are making some pretty bold concessions to to Ukrainian support and in terms of security guarantees. That's coming up. We're going to talk about Greenland, and in about 30 minutes from now, Ellie Leonard and Kait Justice will be on to bring us up to speed with everything regarding Epstein and the very limited files that have been revealed or released by the Department of Justice. So all of that is coming up. But I did want to get your sense of two things. We heard just an hour or so ago from the White House that they are considering military options in terms of Greenland, that they're considering other options as well, acquiring Greenland through other means. But they're not ruling out military options in terms of annexing Greenland after what we saw in Venezuela on the weekend. This is a real affront to NATO. This is a real confrontation with NATO that's coming. What are your thoughts about where we're heading on this issue? Because you're such an expert in this particular, area of expertise.
Well, my first thought is that I wish Europeans paid attention a year ago. I had written that Trump absolutely would go after Greenland, and not only to take Greenland, because for its resources, and for the strategic, his strategic objectives, but also for the fact that he cannot exit NATO, because of Congress, and Congress would never go through taking the United States out of NATO. So there are two ways to exit NATO. One of them would be a bolder way of basically starting a war with NATO countries and having a confrontation with NATO,
Hmm.
and having American troops fighting potentially French and German and Danish and and the rest of Canadian and the rest of the NATO forces. Or the other one is to basically do everything to sabotage NATO. Well,
Right.
he's been doing both, and we had this, conversation probably last March of the fact of what a threat Trump poses to Europe. And at the time, I have written extensively on this, warning that at best America would be neutral to Europe.
Yeah.
At worst, they might be, like another Russia, and do everything to upend their democracies and do everything to, and get into an actual military confrontation, specifically via NATO. They've been running operations there, basically identical to what Russia has done in the United States and across Europe and Canada. They've been running influence and, intelligence gathering operations since the summer. Trump has, sending people to try to find their weaknesses and, who inside of Greenland, or they have already a few people, but how they could build basically, this polarization to the point that what happened here in the United States and what happened, in other European countries create such a polarization, that then he'd be able to, attempt to annex it. And
And it's
the
happening.
French, I remember, a few months ago had issued, a warning that if Americans, now mind you, we have a military base there, but if Americans attempt to use force to seize Greenland, that the French would send troops.
Mhm.
So basically, Trump is putting us in a situation, where potentially Americans, I mean, I just imagine how insane this is, that Americans will be fighting the French and the British and the German and the Danes and every other military force. I mean, these are our allies, our closest allies for decades.
This is not
So
theory anymore. This is what it's going to happen. I mean, clearly, he is in. the Danish prime minister is saying, this will be the change of everything. And of course, we've known it's been the change of everything for a long time. You've been saying it, I've been saying it, others have been saying it, but now we're here. And so the Europeans are in a very difficult position. I mean, they have to not only step in to protect Ukraine, as they have been doing recently, and we'll get to that in a second, they also have to step in now to protect Greenland. That'll be another thing that they'll have to do, potentially Canada as well, because that's all NATO. And if Donald Trump continues in the way that he's going, this is where the situation, this is how they'll be fragmented on many, many fronts.
Well, this is exactly why I had said, and maybe I really should again write about this, that the Europeans need to forget the United States. The United States is gone. The United States is one, too volatile and too dangerous right now. Frankly, if I were Europeans and have military bases within the country, I'd actually be right now worried about these bases and monitoring them like a hawk, because not only is it Greenland, Trump basically put on paper what he's been doing, and that's basically saying that he's going to, overthrow all the democratically elected leaders in Europe. And then he put it on his national security strategy. So that means using all the tools, the CIA, military, whatever tools at America's disposal to get rid of Macron or Merz or, anyone who believes in democracy, and to prop up the AfD, which is a Nazi party that is funded by Russia, and all the other far-right parties. So, Europeans really need to take it serious. And I don't even know why we're here and why this wasn't addressed seriously. I mean, the one thing with Trump, he does not hold back. What he says is what he will do. And he wanted to take Greenland in 2019. He wanted to take Venezuela in 2017. I remember the Russians jumping around like monkeys in like the beginning of 2017 when Trump floated, we're going to invade Venezuela. And they were like, whoa, 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 And at that time, we had guardrails in the U.S. I don't remember who the security people and National Security Council was, but they basically told him, no, Mr. President, you cannot, go invade Venezuela. Those are gone.
Yep.
So he tells you what he's going to do, and it's time for people to really listen to it.
Now, at this hour, there's an extraordinary conference happening in Europe where there are EU leaders and Zelensky, as well as Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. It's so weird to see them on the stage.
And his father.
Yeah. Is
Charles Kushner.
Is he there?
Oh, yes.
This is a very strange event. But of course, what we're hearing at this event is an apparent contradiction, because we're about to play you a clip from Jared and Witkoff where they're saying, well, we can be there to support Ukraine. And of course, we know that they won't be there to support Ukraine because they're not really interested in Ukraine. But I want you to listen to the answer. First, it's interesting to hear Jared speak. It always makes me laugh a little bit. But then also listen to the question that follows, which really summarizes this really huge contradiction we currently have.
Oops. Obviously, you saw last week the incredible capability of the U.S. military, and that's just a small piece of what they're capable of doing. And so they've been really thinking about this, and they believe that a real peace here is possible, and there are ways to stand behind it.
James Mates, ITV News from London. Mr. Summer, Prime Minister, today's commitments by the United States are already being called a game changer, and I know there's a reluctance to talk about Greenland today, but what value do these commitments have on the very day that at the highest levels of government in Washington they are talking about seizing the sovereign territory of a fellow NATO member? Mr. Witkoff or Mr. Kushner, if I may ask you, the commitments made today, does President Trump commit to coming to the aid of any European forces deployed in Ukraine were they to come into conflict with Russian forces? Will President Trump have their back? And President Zelensky, if I may ask you, is this enough? You said before today you were 90% of the way towards a peace agreement. How close are you now?
Well, let me start. On the question of Greenland, I've been very clear as to what my position and the position of the UK government is, both in statements I made myself yesterday and in the statement that was put out earlier today. I've been equally clear that the relationship between the UK and the US is one of our closest relationships, particularly on issues on defence, security and intelligence. And we work with the US 24/7 on those issues.
He doesn't really answer the question in full, but I think what we're seeing here is that a real contradiction. You know, these guys are making assurances to Ukraine at a press conference that they'll be there to back them up. They won't. They're on Russia's side of this equation, obviously. They're making deals with Russia. They've got a plan with Russia. And there's another clip that I won't play because it's in German, but basically, Chancellor Merz is also saying at the same time that he is willing to offer the entire Europe Germany's guarantee of security. But we are seeing a massive divide going on in the world right now between a much smaller and shrinking democratic world versus this expansive dictatorship world, and Ukraine, Greenland, Canada, all caught in the middle.
Well, first of all, before we get to security guarantees, there's not one Ukrainian who believes any security guarantees from Europe or the United States. Let's just start. Take Trump out of the equation. Ukrainians gave up nuclear weapons in 94 at the Budapest Memorandum. You know, everyone signed, the UK and United States. Bill Clinton signed, this wonderful security guarantees that should Ukraine's sovereignty ever, get tested, that the United States and UK and of course Russia and everyone will be there to protect Ukraine. Well, guess what? In 2014, Ukraine's sovereignty not only got tested, there was an invasion. Obama looked the other way. He wanted nothing to do with it. He frankly couldn't care less that the first time post-World War II, you had an invasion of a sovereign country on European soil. So he didn't do nothing. He wiped his hands clean and was like, no, well, this is not our problem. Merkel decided it was a good idea. Never mind the invasion. We have a pipeline to build. We need to do Nord Stream, a pipeline, the Nord Stream 2 and whatnot. The rest of Europe went along with Russia, business as usual. I mean, frankly, it was only up to 2022, mind you. By 2022, Russia had attacked every single election in U.S., across Europe, not once, multiple times. It wasn't just one time. They were involved in several assassination, successful and some not successful operations across Europe. They had a referendum to try to separate Catalonia from Spain. They used, weapons of mass destruction on, European soil to carry out assassinations. I can go on and on and on.
Lots of the
until 2022, when there was the same thing that happened, by the way, in Crimea and Donbass. I mean, nothing changed except that it expanded as far as operation. But the same thing, the kidnapping of children, the torture, the concentration camps, the beheading of Ukrainians, the cutting out of tongues. I can go on and on. All of this was happening until 2022. But then after 2022, now the world couldn't look away anymore because you actually had tanks and planes and everything crossing over, and it was very visual. And that's when you finally saw, the West wake up, Europe and the United States wake up and say, we're going to help Ukraine. But they helped Ukraine at such a slow pace. And again, thank you for all the help, every single ounce, every missile, everything. But they did it at such a slow pace that it allowed Russia to reinforce their positions.
Yeah.
And that's it. And we saw it all publicly, 6 months, like back and forth. Should we send tanks? No, we shouldn't. Yes, we
Now we're
should.
in this
No, we
very new
shouldn't.
situation. I mean, this situation is very different with Venezuela last week and the really
No, but
amplified.
my point is that Ukrainians don't believe that anyone's coming to their aid. So this, whatever they're promising, honestly, that whole press
You don't
conference
think
is a waste of
that
time.
even the situation with Venezuela and even this current knowledge that that a Greenland attack could happen within weeks, months, even Greenland, you don't think will be enough of a trigger for Europe to wake up to this need to help all these countries? I mean, they are talking in Europe about putting boots on the ground as a security guarantee. Now, I'm sure Putin won't agree to that, but there seems to be a waking up with the prime minister of Denmark today saying this will be the end of NATO if Greenland is attacked. I mean, there seems to be an awakening. You don't think that even these things are going to suddenly change their reality and realize that they have to do something?
It will change their reality, but right now, up to literally this moment, they're still cautious in protecting their, NATO territory. I mean, literally, we've seen Russia, nonstop every single day. There's another drone incursion somewhere, and they keep talking about shooting down. We're gonna shoot down. They still haven't come to a consensus that if Russia's fighter jets or drones cross over into NATO territory, whether that should be shot down. I mean, for goodness sakes, I wish they got a little bit of Erdogan from Turkey. He doesn't think twice. If anything crosses into the airspace, he shoots it down.
Yeah.
In 2015, he shot down a Russian jet. The Russians shut up and moved along. And then in recently, he just shot something down of Russia's.
Yeah, he
So
certainly has.
Europeans need to really, really like start acting. This is the one thing. And then, Ukrainians, for instance, would feel more comfortable that there would be security guarantees if they actually took the same security guarantees to secure Estonia or secure
But
Sweden.
it does make sense now for at least, I think, for the Europeans and the Canadians to mount a real defense
Yes,
of Greenland. I
yes.
know it sounds ridiculous who would want to defend Greenland, but it is strategically super important. And it is also protecting NATO. So if Donald Trump wants to go into Greenland, NATO needs to stand up to him there, or they'll be facing him in Canada before they know it.
I sat, and to get to your point, I sat on the phone with a friend of mine in Ukraine the other day, and actually we were bored, and I counted the population between Europe and South Korea and Japan and Canada, taking US out of the equation. Do you know they have like triple the population than the United States? Not to mention the money. I mean, Europe is right up there as far as wealth with the United States. And then if you combine it with the Japanese economy, the South Korean economy, and whatnot. So what they need to do is really, forget NATO. Like NATO needs to exist as long as it can, but put together a European force or even maybe a democracy force, give it a better name, where you have, European countries, Canada, South Korea, Japan, because at the same time, Japan and South Korea are also having issues. Russia recently just tested, the airspace near Korea, buzzing jets and whatnot. Japan, we know, historically the issues, and Russia constantly threatening to invade, Japan and Kuril Islands and whatnot. So they need to put together a force taking the United States out, because right now all the contingency planning needs to be, well, not contingency, all the military planning, and this is what it should have been over the past year, is to plan two things. One scenario, the United States remains neutral and is focused on invading, Cuba and Colombia and whatever. And in Greenland, it isn't irrelevant. Even if it was, I don't care if there are 5 people who live on it. This is Danish territory. This is not the United
Also
States
Arctic
territory.
territory. It's the most
And
important
that's it.
Arctic country that there is because of its steep, landscape that goes all the way into the Arctic. The other thing he points out is the population size. There are 1.5 million standing troops in Europe. I mean, that's not something you just sneeze at. That's a very
No.
big army that's going to be able to hold its place for a long time.
And take Ukraine's actual experience,
Mhm.
because pretty much all the military, between whether it's European militaries, various, or South Korean or Japanese or even American, they haven't fought like Ukrainians. Ukrainians are fighting both with technology, and I mean, you had Americans literally the past few years sitting and like observing everything in different maneuvers, and so you have Ukrainians who can fight from guerrilla warfare to drone warfare to other high-tech warfare and whatnot. They all need to put together a force, and frankly secure. I mean, if all of Europe and every normal country that believes in international law can come together and push the United States back and tell Trump, you want it, come fight us for it, and we're ready to defend. And if he wants to put this America into that situation, then we have a big problem. But this is what they need to do. They need to push back, because he's a bully like Putin, and he will continue bullying and doing as long as everyone's sitting there and having these useless press conferences that they're having right now.
Yeah.
And whatnot.
But it certainly makes sense to defend Greenland. I think a lot of people are arguing that it shouldn't
Absolutely.
be defended, but
No.
there's no reason not to. It is part of European sovereign territory. It's Danish territory, and it's super important strategically in the future, especially around the Arctic and the Arctic trade routes.
Yes, this is like if someone attacks one of Guam
Yeah.
territory. We have to defend it. It's American territory.
And we know what
So
appeasement did in World War II, and letting him take Greenland is basically appeasement.
No.
And we can't do that.
No.
There's only a few minutes left before we can do but let's do a couple of stories for the Trump Tyranny Tracker, because there's so many interesting stories that are covered right now on the tracker. It's day 351. Is that right? Yeah.
No, I think I'm not sure.
It's probably right, because it's
350,
January the 6th today. So,
I think.
So January 20th, I think, is when they came to office. But anyhow, it's 3 something. But I think it's 351. Let's begin with the Justice Department's senior ethics attorney, Joseph Tyrell, who was abruptly fired. Tyrell trained Pam Bondi on ethics rules. He repeatedly flagged conflicts of interest, improper gifts, and event attendance, and outside influence. Now, he blocked efforts to bypass ethics rules, including gifts tied to Conor McGregor and FIFA. He was just dismissed. What's going on there? I mean, not that they've got a lot of ethics, especially when you're talking about what they've done with the Epstein files, but what's happening with the ethics trainer?
Well, he got purged, as everyone else does. Anyone who is actually doing their job and following their oath to the Constitution apparently, gets punished. And this is just another case as they continue to clean house and basically replace Department of Justice with, and frankly, every agency with, these subservients who will do whatever Trump or their superiors ask. And that's it. So, I mean, here we have another one who got purged, all because he was making sure, that ethics rules are enforced, which I think that really went out the window, especially with Trump's corruption and selling of pardons and, frankly, everything else that he's doing that's absolute,
One of the things that I think he pointed out to was Todd Blanche's personal assets of owning a few crypto. Was it $185,000 in crypto assets? I think he told him that might be a conflict of interest in terms of him also fighting cryptocurrency crimes amongst these cryptocurrency companies. And that's another reason he may have been fired. It's quite stunning when you think about the level of corruption inside the DOJ right now.
There is a level of corruption unseen, honestly, frankly, not in our lifetimes. But this is why it's super important. Like, this needs to be documented. They all need to be dealt with. I mean, there is no ands, ifs, or buts. They need to be dealt with. And that's it. Like we need to make sure every single one of these people, I don't care if it's a regular worker or the head of DOJ or what their position is, if they committed any kind of crimes or, were engaged in this corruption, they need to be dealt with.
ICE has now routinely used mobile facial recognition app called Mobile Fortify. Officers scan faces in public and instantly identify individuals and their immigration status. The tool has been used more than 100,000 times. It pulls from multiple government databases, stores images without consent, and is expanding alongside broader biometric surveillance as ICE receives unprecedented funding for mass deportations. Sounds like Minority Report or Fifth Dimension. It sounds so crazy that they're going around scanning people's faces and using facial recognition, but it's a reality.
It is a reality, and since last year I've been warning, because I saw this story happen many times around, that immigrants are the test case. So right now they're scanning immigrants and, anyone, frankly, who is brown, now who they suspect of, potentially being an immigrant, because due process is out the window. But this is going to expand. So now you could imagine if there is a list of, activists or journalists or whatever put together that they pull from different databases, and then, eventually you will have these thugs walking around and just scanning people's faces. Oh, you're on this list. Come with me. And it will expand. I mean, this surveillance in Russia, when they were building such a big surveillance program, it was always the immigrants and the migrants who were the test case.
So easy to do that amongst the people who aren't part of the core group of your population. The U.S. Postal Service has announced it's no longer guaranteeing mail will be postmarked on the day it's dropped off. That means ballots mailed by Election Day may receive later postmarks once processed at regional facilities. In states that rely on postmark deadlines for counting late arrival ballots, this change invalidates thousands of votes unless voters request a manual postmark at a post office counter. This is significant and can be so easily manipulated for individual districts which have different population groups or different political leanings.
Yeah, and all I will say on this is they are doing everything to try to rig the midterms. We have a very good shot at, basically at least getting the House back. I do believe so. We've seen, what happens when, it's numbers that wins this, and when you have a mass amount of people come out. And my thing to this, and all year you're going to have hear me repeat this over and over. We all have one job to do, and that is to make sure that our vote is in. And if you have to physically go hand it, swim there to hand it, whatever you need to do to make sure that your vote is cast, this is the year that we're going to have to do it. And, if it's sacrificing a few extra hours, whatever it is, because this is how important it is. I mean, we do have a chance, and they will use these tactics, and they did this over the holiday season. How many people are reading news, during Christmas or New Year's?
It always happens when everyone else is having a good time and they can't notice. Olga Lautman, thank you very much for being here again today for the Trump Tyranny Tracker Live. This is day 351. Tell everyone what you're doing on unmasking Russia. You've had a lot of great reporting about Greenland, but what else can people look out for? And also what's on the TTT, the Trump Tyranny Tracker?
Right now, my biggest thing, I relaunched my malign influence operations and started with a very, very deep investigation of Russia's Orthodox Church via a few Americans in North Carolina and Congress. So I did a very deep investigation into this. They're trying to paint Ukraine as persecuting Christians and whatnot. But this influence operations newsletter is going to be for deep investigations. I have one coming out on Orban and Germany and the New York Republican Club sometime next week. Me and a friend of mine from Ukraine, we've been working our butts off to make sure, like, to document what's happening in Europe with Russia's operations, what's happening in the US with Russia's operations. And this is not commentary or like opinion or whatnot. This is actual investigations where we're like living in registries and, and doing real digging.
Real digging.
So,
Well, you do amazing work. Everyone needs to follow the great Olga Lautman at Trump Tyranny Tracker or at Unmasking Russia. Make sure it's a paid subscription. She absolutely deserves it. And we'll see you again on Thursday when we do this again on the Trump Tyranny Tracker.
Yes, we shall do it again. Have a good show.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
And we are
Bye.
having the rest of our show because there is more to tonight's show. I'm going to bring in Kait and Ellie, who, in 1 second, let me do this properly. There's Kait and Ellie. Have you guys met before on camera?
Not like this.
Not on camera, no.
How great is that? Well, Kait, Justice, Ellie, Leonard, you know each other so well. So it's nice that you finally have met this way. Kait, this is your first time doing a Substack Live.
Yes, I have done lives and things, but not on Substack. I've only been on Substack since October, really, writing since November. So it's been, I love this community. This place is probably my favorite on the internet right now.
Oh, yeah. It's my favorite ever on the internet because it's been so successful for all of us. Kait does incredible work on Jeffrey Epstein so far. I don't know if you're planning on doing much more, but there's the work you've done on Jeffrey Epstein has been so impressive, and it certainly brought you to a huge limelight. And that's why we're glad you're on here tonight. Tell everyone a little bit more about what they can expect from your Substack, just so they're familiar and can also subscribe using the button on our top left here.
Sure. So the Epstein stuff has been really interesting. And I've realized that it ties into a lot of different things that I do. I started as more of an activist in the environmental space, working on Superfund sites, and I started talking about Jeffrey Epstein. And so I started writing on Substack instead of, I was on Threads and I was just kind of talking about it, and everyone's like, you should just write over there. That way you can talk about it. And I started deep diving, and here we are. And so I do that. And I talk a lot about transparency and trying to get the average person to feel empowered to ask questions. So I don't have credentials like a lot of people who talk about this topic do. I am what I call an average informed citizen. So my goal is to just, allow people to feel like they can ask questions. So I do that on my Substack. And then I have this little series that I'm calling the Motherhood Heist. And it kind of ties into similar stuff in terms of, trying to find that transparency and accountability in the corporate world and our government.
Oh, interesting. So, is it called Kait Justice? That is the site, or is there another?
Yeah. So my username is Kait Justice, and then the publication is Downwind of Truth.
Oh, okay. Everyone should check it out. I read it all the time. Ellie Leonard reads it all the time, and Ellie Leonard we all are very, very familiar with because she's done such incredible work as well in Epstein, but so many other great things. I'm glad you're both here today because we just heard today that the Justice Department is basically still has 2 million documents to review and has only released 1% of the documents. All the stuff that you've been reading in so much detail is just 1% of the total. And probably the good stuff is still in the hidden stuff.
Absolutely.
We found this out in a letter that was sent to the judge today, who was asking all these questions about what's been going on. Are you surprised? In some ways I am, in some ways I'm not, by this sort of slow rollout. We may never see these things, but they're certainly promising to get them out in the next few months. Ellie, what do you think? Is this a legitimate effort that they're trying to put up, or is this just another delay?
No, there's nothing legitimate about it. I don't think we'll ever get them legitimately, but we'll get them kicking and screaming. And I think that's how we've gotten what we have so far. Again, I'm still very hopeful about the Epstein estate documents, which I think we have more access to. And I think there are many, many, many things in that estate that the DOJ doesn't have their hands on, that's still in the possession of Darren Indyk and Richard Kahn. And they are malleable, they are payable, and we can get those documents. The other documents the number keeps changing, and I kind of wonder if that's part of the distraction, is they'll tell us a number, but there's actually another number. I have heard as high as something like 20 million, which I'm really, really hoping
Oh my
there are
gosh.
not 20 million documents.
No, they
I'm just
can't
like,
be.
I can't, I'm
I
going to have
know.
to train my grandkids how to
Yeah.
do this
Yeah.
because I'm not going to live that long. So I think potentially we will get them. It's kind of like it's just basically on a time limit. It's how long the people who are resisting giving them to us can hold out and last and live. And eventually there's turnover, and with turnover will come fresh minds, fresh faces, fresh ideas, and we will get the files.
What do you think it is
Could
that's
be long.
keeping them from us? I mean, is there? I haven't answered this question, but is it just Donald Trump, or is it? I mean, these are much bigger forces, obviously.
It is everybody there. When you hit above a certain pay grade and power grade, it's a more than 50% ratio of people being connected in these files. So, you've heard recently, if it's true, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying the reason that Trump didn't want to release the files is because his friends are all involved. Well, that's probably true. His friends probably are all involved if he's involved, which I don't know how he's not involved on some level. I mean, we already know that he was hanging around for 15 years. So I just think the fingers of these files connect to so many things that people are terrified that they don't even know the things that they've done that are in those files.
Yeah, I think so. Kait, what do you think is behind all of this? Like, as you've been studying this and investigating Epstein, who's keeping it from us?
So I think, everything that Ellie said is very much the case, but I feel like it is, like she said, it's very much distracting. So they're trying to they're hoping that we're going to forget, which obviously we're not going to do. But they're also kind of dripping it out, and then I think what they're doing honestly is hiding some of the good stuff, like in a whole sea of nothing. And so they're really making us hunt for all of those details. And I don't know that they really expected people like us to be doing that to this degree. But I think at this point, what started as, a lot of people advocating for victims turned into just so many layers of justice and so many layers of accountability, to the American people. And what do you mean he's part of intelligence? So, I think there's a lot of people who have a lot of stake in not letting these files out. So I think Pam Bondi's I wouldn't want to be her. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
she's in an interesting position.
Yeah. And she, I think that she knows what she has to do, and she knows that not having these released at this point is illegal. But unfortunately, we've proven time and time again for many years at this point that we're not going to do anything about it.
That's true. Although we are doing stuff about it because
We
the
are.
three of
That's
us are
true.
all investigating Epstein, and there's so many other people who are investigating it. And there's some real comfort for me in knowing that there's probably thousands of people around the world who are poring over every single email that comes out, every single document that comes out. And once you have a certain amount of data, you can connect a lot of dots. And that's certainly what you guys have been doing, what I've been doing. And I asked you both to bring some examples of the things that you found that were really interesting, that will help everyone understand why it's so important that we do keep fighting for the Epstein files release. And there are two in particular that Katie, you brought to the table. Why don't you just tell me which one you want to go with first? I'm not sure which one you prefer to discuss.
I mean, I guess we could probably start with Zorro Ranch and
Okay.
the fact that, from everything I can find, that has never actually been searched. And
It's
then it was
stunning.
sold to a trust, or I'm sorry, an LLC that
Yeah.
was formed the month before the property was sold. And I think, again, to what I was saying about how they just release all this stuff and hope that we're not paying attention. I think this is one of those examples where we've been so focused over here that nobody really thought. I mean, not nobody. There is a group of people that have been very much focused on this.
Mhm.
But, the masses, I guess, we haven't collectively been like, wait a minute, why did that happen? So
Right.
Yeah.
So, this is amazing news because I had no idea. I mean, for the Zorro Ranch, to me, is the most interesting of them because we know so little about it. And what you've uncovered in these emails is information that we hadn't known before, that this has never really been a place that has been searched by police. And you've discovered it not only that it was not searched by accident, it wasn't searched deliberately. The
Yes.
FBI actually asked local officials not to do it. Why?
Hmm. That's one of the questions that I am trying to figure out. So again, my perspective when I am looking through these is, I'm an average citizen. I don't have a law degree. I have a lot of information and I've learned a lot, but I don't have that experience, I guess.
Mm.
So one of the things when I saw this email was I wondered, well, why would they do that? And so what
Is this
happened
email? I just want
was
to make sure I'm showing the right thing. That's what
I think so. Let me
it's
make
the
it bigger.
we were
Yeah,
pleased to see. This is
I
the
had I can't really read it on my screen. But
greetings
it's
from
just
DNM. Well done on the new indictment against Ms. Maxwell. We were pleased to see the conduct of New Mexico formed the basis of one of your overt acts. Is that the one?
so that's not the one,
Okay.
but that one's important.
Okay.
And so that was also to the point of why we never investigated. The reason I had shared that one is because in this email, they're very clearly saying that that location
Hmm.
was key to the indictment for Maxwell. So
Right.
why
That's
wouldn't we
interesting.
have any evidence from it, regardless of what came of that? There was enough there for it to be a key part of this.
Okay.
So that's why I had shared that
And then, so this
email.
was the one maybe you're talking about, the New Mexico AG's office back in July 2019. Tell us about this email. Should I read it to everyone if you can't read it?
Yeah, the highlighted part really
Okay.
is the part.
Proceed with whatever other investigation unrelated to sex trafficking they may have concerning Epstein, and told them that at the conclusion of our case, we would pass along any information we may have gathered.
Yeah, so in that email, they're telling the New Mexican officials, if you have anything else you want to investigate into Epstein, go for it. Just nothing related to the sex trafficking.
Mm.
And essentially, they would be working on that and they would eventually share anything that they had come up with.
So this is
And
the Southern
so,
District of New York asking local officials to stand down on investigating anything around the Zorro Ranch, around sexual trafficking. Wow, that's
yes.
a hell of a thing.
And it's very specific. And so
Mm.
that's the part, as someone again who's not a professional in this area, I wasn't sure, is that a normal thing to do? It just, from what I have been able to understand at this point, it's not unusual for, different jurisdictions like that to break up an investigation, but not like that. Not like like nothing related to the sex trafficking and so that's the part I was trying. I haven't had a chance yet, but I'm
Mm.
going to be looking more into why they did this. Because from everything I can understand, they did this and then nothing happened from there.
I think it's got to do with deconfliction, and I think they do this all the time in various investigations where they just tell people to sort of hands off things. But the fact that this long after the case, and it was sold, and there was no evidence collection there, seems striking to me that there's no evidence collection. And even though the SDNY was doing the investigation, why didn't they collect evidence? That's pretty bizarre for me. Tell everyone what the Zorro Ranch really is, because most people don't know that it's this sort of mysterious other location in New Mexico
Yeah.
that Epstein did things in.
Yeah, so we hear a lot about the Palm Beach and his New York townhouse locations, but the ranch in New Mexico is kind of mysterious, and there was accounts of abuse happening at this
Mm.
location. So it's not like it's just a place that he owned and there's nothing of it. There's multiple reports that abuse happened here.
Right.
And then if you go through the files, you have a lot of different FBI tips.
Hmm.
So I don't know what to make of those entirely yet because they're tips. So, from my understanding, they're things that have just come into the FBI, right? They're not necessarily factual things that are definitely
Right.
true. Also, I imagine though they get millions of these, and these ones are included in the files. So, it's like when you see these FBI tips, it's like you can store the information, but you have to know None
Yeah.
of it's necessarily been proven. So that location, he had, I don't even know, maybe Ellie can help me with this a little bit, but the acreage, it was, I mean,
It was
thousands of
huge.
acres.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
his
and then
biggest
he
property,
leased
isn't it?
property.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
some of
that's his
it,
biggest.
some of it was leased,
Like the
and some
actual
of it was his.
compound is the biggest property, though, isn't it? Like home size wise, I
in New
believe.
Mexico, I think
Yeah,
so. I
his
think I've
the
heard that.
actual
Yeah,
property, like the
Yeah.
home,
yeah.
yeah. And I think it was like a compound, and there was so much to it. And there's a lot of theories, right? So you can go way down the rabbit hole. People have all kinds of ideas about things that might have happened there, and
Hmm.
so those kinds of things, I like to explore them before I talk more about them, just because I'm like, I don't know, there's so much to it. But
Right.
from everything I've at least figured out, I
Mhm.
know that he had purchased the property from was it the King family? I can't remember their name now. But what was
Okay.
interesting is that this family that they purchased it from, I think it was from 2007 to like 2015. That gentleman's son was the attorney. I don't know if it was the New Mexican Attorney General
Mm,
or that location, but there was some
Hmm.
connection there as well
that's right.
during the time when abuse was likely happening. So there's a lot of things there, but what is important is in New Mexico, they had actually, the representatives there have planned to file legislation to form a committee that will look into why this has never been investigated, like what is actually
Hmm.
Mm,
happening here, because it's so, at least from the outside, corrupt. Like
yeah,
it just looks
it
like
does look very
there's a
corrupt.
lot of cover up there.
Yeah. Well, New Mexico is a perfect place to cause crime. I mean, we've seen, that's why it's so many movies and crime series. That's where they're based. It's desert, it's open, it's very sparsely populated. It's right by the border. All sorts of things you can get away with there.
That's what it is. I mean, to think of somebody being a victim there, right?
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
there is nowhere to go. I mean, if
Hmm.
you are brought to a property like that and you're in the desert, 300 acres would be a lot to try to
Hmm.
navigate out of, never mind a place that has thousands. I mean, it just, when you think about it like that, that's very scary. People always want to victim blame, and it's like, think about it like that. Where are they going?
Yeah.
Especially most of them were very young.
It was the other island.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
Zorro
very
was.
much
It
so,
was the
very much.
it was the
And
other
not
island, and it was.
so
Go
go ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, please go ahead, Emily.
I was just gonna say it was a hot spot for a lot of these bigger names that would come visit because it was Western, and you'd get a lot of the tech people who were going out to California. A lot of people would stay there. But it was also what was I just gonna say? Oh, Bill Richardson. Bill
Hmm.
Richardson was
Yes.
governor of New Mexico, and he was named by Virginia Giuffre as one of the
One of
people
the
abusing children. So, I mean, I'm sure he has a hand in why they might not potentially investigate that house.
Right, right. The former governor would make sense that they wouldn't investigate him that readily. Ellie, Zorro Ranch comes up in one of the documents. Is this from you that you sent me today? I think it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there it is. Zorro Ranch is shown up there as a $72 million in value, more than the
Mhm.
brownstone in New York City, more than the Palm Beach home. Not
Yeah.
as much as the Great St. James Island for $86 million. Wow.
Staten Island.
Tell me what we're looking at here. This is a part of what you're pointing
Oh
to
my gosh.
is a really important development about Epstein.
Yeah, I went down a huge rabbit hole
Mhm.
this week with this story. Okay, so I actually went into the first, quote unquote, suicide attempt of Jeffrey Epstein while he was in the Manhattan County Jail. And this is a document that shows, and this is actually from the U.S. Virgin Islands versus the Epstein Trust. It was a lawsuit after he had died that showed that he had actually changed his will 2 days before he died. So on August 8th, 2019, he changed his will. He changed the ownership of the trust to be for Darren
strange.
Indyke. Yeah, it's for Darren Indyke, who is his accountant, and Richard Kahn, who's his lawyer. Prior to that, he had just random friends. He had Henry Jarecki was like the owner of the trust. Like he changed it every
Some
like
people weren't
5.
that random. I mean, Jess Staley was once
Yeah,
at one point,
just
who was his best
Haley.
friend, and also J.P.
Right.
Morgan. So was the guy in charge of Bear Stearns, Kane, the
Yes.
CEO of. He
Yes.
was also one of the previous trustees. So there's some people were significant, some people not. I think Summers was as well at one point.
Yeah.
Rumored to
Yeah,
be.
and he changed it a lot. He changed
Yeah.
it a lot, but it was
2
very
days before he
significant.
died, he was in
Yes,
captivity, right?
it stands out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I started reading a lot of these reports about, there's quite a lot about the reports about his first, however you view it, his first suicide attempt in jail. And they vary so much that it's just striking. Like it's not, there's typical variation in how people report and remember things, but these are very drastic differences. So he was housed with a man named Nicholas Tartaglione, who I believe had killed a police officer. I don't know if I have that
That's
right,
right,
but
yeah.
he was his bunkie. And they came and they found Epstein unresponsive. They said some people said he was sitting up, some people said he was in the fetal position, he was making like snoring sounds. But these reports, and there are several, I would say there's at least 5 or 6 or 7, there's a good amount of reports after the fact, all say something different about how he was found. Some people say he was talking and responsive and awake, and they were able to ask him questions. Other people say that they are like giving him chest compressions and CPR, and they vary so much that you question the intent of the people who are reporting.
Right. So this is the first. Let's just place everyone in the right place. So this is the first suicide attempt. Happened before he was obviously died because he couldn't happen after.
This is July 23rd, and he was arrested July 6th. So this is July 23rd.
Before he's in solitary confinement, he's got this bunk bed, this guy that he's with in his bunkie, I guess. And this guy's a very menacing, very built, very dangerous looking guy.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Look up his pictures.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not an accident that he was placed there because that's not the kind of guy you'd want to arrive in a jail cell sitting next to him. And I know that Epstein was terrified of that. And then ultimately there was an attempt on his. Depends what you're saying here. Either he committed suicide, or attempted to commit suicide, or he was beaten, or something.
Yes.
Yeah. So what did you? Yeah.
So Nicholas Tartaglione became his roommate like halfway through July. So maybe a week after he got there, which I was talking with Lev, and he said that is pretty wild for a guy of Epstein's stature and the story and everything, for him to walk in there and get a roommate. Like that would be just unconscionable. You'd be in something called the SHU, which is the special housing unit, which is where Lev was because people knew who he was, right? When he went to prison. And when people know who you are, you generally don't get a roommate. But he went in, he got this roommate, and they find him on the floor. They find him unresponsive. They said that there was a makeshift noose around his neck. Again, people question about how you can hang yourself when the bunk beds are not that high. Epstein says, he tells a story that changes. He says that I was, I thought I went to sleep. I got up and got a drink of water, that all of a sudden I heard snoring and I realized it was myself. And then Tartaglione says he touched my shoe or something like that. And I said, hey, dude, what's going on? Are you okay? And he called for help. And there's different stories about how help was called, if a button was pressed, if somebody was yelling, if somebody was just checking their cell and happened to be stopping by. But Epstein's story changed from nothing was going on. He wanted to make sure everybody knew nothing bad happened. He didn't want to say anything, to then saying his roommate was trying to extort him for money and had been for over a week and had threatened to kill him and he couldn't tell anybody. And so it varied quite a lot. And with what we know about Epstein and how convincing he was to the people he talks to, it's very difficult to know what is the truth, because he could convince people that he was fine. He could convince people that he was being killed. I had a chance to talk with Mark Epstein this week a couple of times.
How was that?
And he's very, very convinced that his brother did not kill himself. He's dead set that his brother did not kill himself in jail. And, I I approached that objectively. And he said, obviously, he's going to say that he couldn't. He goes, his quote is, "Come on, you really think he couldn't remember anything?" And I said, I don't know. He's kind of an intimidating guy.
Yeah,
I can hear him say it. Like I can hear his voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you wonder if he made it up in order to get out of there? Whether there was, is that a possibility at all that he wanted to move into solitary confinement because he didn't like having a bunkie?
It could be. There's little details along the way. There's the one recording I think from Bannon, maybe it's from Michael Wolff, where he talks about people start to go crazy after 24 hours in jail or in solitary. But there are weird little things in the reports where they said he would be acting a certain way, like he was falling over or making weird sounds, until they looked away, and then they would start to realize he was being totally normal, and then they'd look at him again and he'd start to do these things again. So there's a lot of questions about how much of it was acting versus if he was really hurt, because they said he had a little bit of abrasions, a little bit of an abrasion on his knee, but he really wasn't injured from the first time around. And his first reasoning for the whole thing was that he hadn't slept since he got to the jail, because they do check on you like every 15 minutes. It is hard to sleep in a jail.
Except the day that he died, and then they didn't check.
Right. Yep, didn't check on him. But and that he needed his CPAP machine and he couldn't sleep, and so he was sleep deprived. Again, Mark Epstein is adamant that that's not what happened. He said that he was being extorted all over the place. I'm trying to get from him if he was close with his brother or if he's getting all this from hearsay and other people talking to him. But he said he was absolutely not suicidal, which is why they took him off suicide watch 24 hours after the first attempt, which I also thought was a little bit weird. But he said, the only reason they would take him off that quickly is because they were convinced that he wasn't suicidal. So that means they knew somebody was beating on him. Well, they pulled this guy out on the 23rd, his roommate, they pulled him out on the 23rd, and guess what? They gave him another roommate 7 days later. So who then actually was pulled out the day before he died. He had a roommate until the 9th, and then that guy died, or that guy was pulled out.
What's that roommate? Do we know who that's middle roommate
yes.
was?
That's Efren Reyes, who also has since died, so he is not able to be spoken to. He died of COVID, supposedly, but there's no record of him anywhere.
I know that during that time, when I was speaking to Stephen Hoffenberg at the time, he would tell me that Epstein was desperate to get upgraded in terms of his accommodation. So he was negotiating a lot of information with prosecutors that he was talking. He was willing to talk. And what he wanted was to get it upgraded, really. I mean, I don't know what that means in the MCC world, but, it's clear that was the relationship at the time and the tension that was going on at the time. And one imagines if this is the Trump administration and Bill Barr that are putting him behind bars, finding out that he's still talking would be distressing for them, maybe, so it wouldn't be the kind of thing that they would want to hear, having just arrested him. The last thing they'd want to know is that he was still spilling the beans on something that they might have been involved in.
I want to say I read something in the files where Mark Epstein had said that was the motive, that they knew he was going to start talking, and then I can't remember do you remember that, Ellie? I don't know if you saw that or not.
Well, he said some things about Bill Barr today that I'm going to ask him before I say on the air.
Fair.
I don't know. He hasn't said they're off the record, but again, he's very intimidating, so I don't want to mess around. But I do know there was a question. There was a question about who declared it a suicide versus a homicide, and and the information changing about who actually made that declaration, which doctor made that declaration, and he's that kept changing, and that came from Bill Barr, and so without going into further details, I do know that he has a problem with Bill Barr in that entire situation.
One other random fact about Bill Barr, his daughter had made her way into, I think it was FinCEN.
Yeah, that's right.
So she was one of the people who would have gotten the SARs when they arrived in 2019.
That's right.
And I just thought that was interesting because I've connected Bill Barr to his father and that whole connection, but then I more recently had realized his daughter also was very much in there, and she had just moved into that position in 2019.
There were also consistent rumors, you recall or may not recall, about Bill Barr visiting Epstein in jail in the week before he died. And I remember seeing a prisoner log that I've not been able to find again since, with Bill Barr's name in there. It wasn't Bill Barr; it was something else Barr, but it was definitely what would have been his signature in there. And so it is possible that Bill Barr visited, and I know it's been disputed by many people over the years, but it's one of those things that sort of is a nagging thing that I've never been able to find again.
Find that.
Is that visitor log, and it seems maybe
Yeah.
weird that he'd even have to sign the visitor's log, but if he was there that week of the suicide, and we know circumstances, that would be really interesting too. I'm glad you're going down that rabbit hole, because I think there's a lot of interesting information in who would want Epstein dead. I mean, really, that's the question.
I also know that he was meeting with his lawyers the same day. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of weird circumstantial stuff. I question why he would have been so despondent this time around. He was more powerful than he was the first time around, and he was still being indicted on only 2 charges. For all these women who had accused him, he still only had 2 indictments, and they were the exact same 2 indictments from the first time around. So I don't know what would make him think that he couldn't beat this when he'd already done it one time.
Yeah, it could be just the totality of it all. I know he was, just that it was not a good place to be, MCC. It was full of insects, and cockroaches,
only
and
thing
rats, and all sorts of things. So
about
really
the
his lifestyle.
suicide, though, that really sat with me was I had read Virginia's book, and in there she had made a statement very specifically about how she personally found it hard to believe that he was cremated and put in this site, or that he was cremated at all, because she specifically remembered him telling her that when he died, he would be frozen until there was enough science to bring him back. And she's
Well,
like,
it's
so for
also
him
it's
to
against the Jewish religion to cremate
this is
someone.
true, yes. And
Yeah.
so it was just like she's like, it just doesn't make sense that he would be cremated. She's like, he was very adamant that he would be preserved until they were able to bring him back. And I just thought that was so interesting. That was in her book. So
And it did have an interesting cryogenics. I remember that. So there is actually
yes,
that makes a lot of sense, and certainly had the money to do it.
absolutely.
Kate, I want to just can you guys still hear me? Because I changed the
Yeah.
setup.
Yes.
You can see this. What is the story that you have also highlighted on your site about this election interference? And I know this is cropped in a weird way. I couldn't get it to generate properly, but
That's okay.
But explain to this is an email from a guy named Zubair Khan. It's a name I've recognized from another place. But before we get into that, tell me what he's busy telling Jeffrey Epstein about here that relates to Elon Musk.
So this is what I found. So this is how I get to Elon Musk here. But this particular email, he was talking to Epstein about a tool that he had presented a business plan for to him. And it was like proprietary information on how everything would work for this particular tool. And he had very specifically at one point mentioned that yeah, I think that's what this one is, that they had to close this tool down because the Twitter, specifically the Twitter data, was too expensive to be sustainable. And this tool was designed, and I don't remember the exact language, but it says it in the business plan, that it's designed to, manipulate and influence voters.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line between, using data intentionally and manipulating things. But the part what made me think about this is I had seen another headline about Elon Musk and how France is indicting, not, I don't think him specifically, but X. They're bringing charges or an investigation against them into election interference. And so it just made me, this is my pattern recognition. I just remembered this particular tool. I had saved it, the emails and stuff, because I'm like, this seems important.
Yeah.
And so when I went back, I realized that the thing that was stopping them was apparently Twitter. And then, from there, Elon Musk had purchased Twitter. And then apparently we have some reason to believe that there's election interference in France. So naturally, that has me wanting to explore this a lot more to see, could that
So
have been the case in 2024?
it's so interesting that he's getting pitched by a company about election manipulation. I mean, we had not seen Jeffrey Epstein involved in that kind of level. I mean, we sort of see Cambridge Analytica and those kinds of things, but we hadn't seen any evidence that I can recall of him directly being involved in election manipulation. Although there is, lots of talk with him and Bannon, and he certainly he said he was going to consult for. Was it Ehud Barak that he was going to consult for in Israel? I don't know. There's a lot
I think that's what it was. Yep.
There's certainly a lot of places where he's involved in politics and influencing in politics, but I'd never seen him engaged with an app like this, which is very similar to Cambridge Analytica, which was basically sentiment analyzing things that data was receiving from Twitter or elsewhere, and then trying to influence people's voting decisions. But this is, of course, how 2016 became 2016. This is how Donald Trump was first elected, and it's reason probably why Elon Musk bought Twitter and made it into X down the line, and why he's now facing those charges in France.
Right.
But it's an interesting discovery that he was getting pitched this. It makes you wonder whether he was involved in some of the election manipulation that was going on. You said this was in 20. When was this email? I think it was 2016.
Maybe?
Let me double check here.
I can't remember. Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head with that one.
As I said, this is one of them, but that's not 2016. Let me see.
No, that's the business plan, I believe.
2016.
2016. This is after the election. 2016. They just finished.
That's right. This was days after the 2016 election, and this particular email, they said that they had gotten New York and I can't read that one. Wyoming,
New York
maybe?
and Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
And they got 13 states out of 11 right. Sorry, out of the 13
I think he
states
later
11
went
right.
on to say, like, the next email in the sequence or something was like, actually, we got New York right. So they had predicted all of this. But then this is the email where he goes on to say, however, we can't keep doing this because Twitter data is too expensive.
So this means that he was potentially, if this is only good, maybe there's more of these emails, maybe he was getting some detail from this company, even leading up to Donald Trump's election in 2016, which would be, fascinating to know that he had that insight on a granular level from the data. That's really interesting. We've got a few more minutes here, but we actually passed time. But I am really interested, Ellie, in the other story you're looking at, which is all about Ghislaine Maxwell's husband, which is not someone we hear a lot about.
I was seeing you writing like you were in the thick of it. I'm very excited to read about this.
So this is what's his name? Scott Bergeron or something? No, that's not what Scott Bergeron.
Scott Borgerson. If I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah. So Scott Borgerson, he popped up just. I'm reading through their court documents, and they keep referring to her spouse, and how she's thinking of divorcing him so that he doesn't have to deal with the detriment of the trial. And it was kind of like, wait, what? Go back. So Scott Borgerson he's a very interesting character. He has a very, as Zev and I were kind of going over his education history, but he started out at the Coast Guard Academy and then got a master's in law and diplomacy and a PhD in international relations, and then went out and became a CEO of a company called Cargo Metrics. So it's a shipping company, and it's like all these kind of red flags for like spy stuff.
It does.
That's interesting.
It's like perfect Ghislaine Maxwell husband material. Just fits the mold. So if they got married, if it was a legal marriage, it would have probably happened in 2016, which is interesting that she's talking about not putting him through all this heartache when it's after she's in the thick of it. I mean, she's already been sued by Virginia Giuffre. Like, everybody knows the story. And then they got married. They transferred all their assets in 2015. And so like they after Epstein was arrested, she went into hiding, and they found her on this, I think it's 159 acres in Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts, this big estate. She was going by Jane Marshall. I think they were Scott and Jane Marshall. They did the same thing. They started an LLC. The LLC
doesn't sound like spying at all, with fake names and all that kind of stuff.
Like,
it seems so legitimate.
It's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing in this circle to start a business to buy a house. Like, Epstein had a business called 9 East 71st Street was his business, and that's what bought his house. So so they're living out their life there. And so I'm doing this kind of weird dive into who this guy is. He suddenly has all the money that was how much she was worth is now how much he's worth. But it's not enough. I feel like there's money missing because he was worth 5, now he's worth 25 million. She was worth 20 million, but there's more money somewhere. Like 25 million doesn't feel like a big enough number to me.
For him.
I mean, with her money combined with his, like I feel like
She
there's
got all his
missing.
money. He got all her money. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, it's in his name. Everything's in his name.
That's not a very
So
convenient
anything that's
marriage.
associated with her estate is now in his name, and he lives in Essex, Massachusetts. So I'm like trying very hard to track him down. But like I'm on this weird rabbit hole. People are helping me, and they said, you need to go to all the consignment shops in Manchester by the Sea and call them because she was a big consigner, and you need to know what she was buying and selling. You need to go look up his dog's license number through the state and all their court records. So I'm like looking at all these weird things, but I want to know if the marriage was legitimate, if it was a business deal, when it happened, if they're still legally married. I just have so many questions. So that is something I'm digging into.
He is on Wyden's list, on Senator Ron Wyden's list of people that he wants more information of. And I think he was number 21 on that list. So that's a pretty high up number because he's up again, up with all the other big names.
And he's quite young. He's only 50. Like he's much younger than her.
And it is interesting, that he was involved in this company. What was the name again? The cargo.
He's got a few, but it was called Cargo Metrics,
which was a company that was all about tracking how much cargo is being carried on vessels in and out of all the major ports of the world, which is really useful intelligence for any intelligence
It's
agency.
so useful. And I know that Epstein was it the Sultan? There was somebody that he was friends with very closely, and that was they were the president of, I can't remember. I'll have to look it up now, but it had to do with
I think it was him. It was like I know what you're talking about, but I can't.
The world something.
DP World. DP World.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Yep.
So you get a lot of data that way about everything. I mean, if you know what's being shipped on cargo ships, you know exactly how the state of an economy is doing, what people are buying or not buying. You know exactly how much supply is arriving. It's a very useful information to any intelligence service, and it's interesting that many people don't think of Ghislaine as that, but certainly her father was very much involved in data mining of this kind. And the whole idea of them getting married is so interesting because that's how things were done. I mean, in some ways, Jeffrey Epstein was meant to be Ghislaine's husband.
It's like a chain, right? It's like a chain of the same guy over and over and over again. Yeah.
And so if you're an intelligence agency trying to pass assets between different people, marriage is a good way of doing it because it's mostly tax-free. It's mostly just lands up in the other person's name and there's a way of doing it also through generations in a way that it's not going to be so less of an issue, I think. But depending on the tax rules for every country. But it is interesting that all these guys are married to women who are connected to intelligence agencies. It's just so interesting that's where this lands up.
She's a very common thread in all of this. I know she plays very Mary Poppins, but she is a very common thread in all of this story.
Ghislaine?
Yes.
She is the story in some ways. I mean, in some ways, I think, it's like Jeffrey Epstein's super interesting, but Jeffrey Epstein just completes the second part of the Maxwell episode. And this is why it's so important that everyone really push for these files to come out. And it's, I do think that a little bit of this Venezuela stuff, this Maduro hype this week has all been an attempt to really suppress some of the interest into Epstein. And really we have to refocus everyone's attention on how important it is that this information comes out, because this is not just a human trafficking story, although that is a huge part and a very important part of the story. But that human trafficking piece of it has helped us lift the lid on a much bigger international crime syndicate involved in all sorts of nefarious activities. And in the greatest heist, and this week, I hopefully you'll finish with this chapter this week, because it finally shows you how it's so difficult to write while you're doing all this other stuff. But but this week we'll show you exactly how they were able to protect their friends, their network of criminals, as 2008 was happening and everyone was losing their money and losing their shirts. Jeffrey Epstein had figured out a way to protect the investment of his friends. And I believe that includes Donald Trump, by the way. We're just trying to figure that last part out. But, you know, how did they do that? They got the taxpayer to bail everyone out. And that's why, you know, the crimes are so massive. It's hard to imagine what $6.7 billion feels like or looks like. And it's hard to see the victims in a crime like that because it's hidden through mortgage-backed securities and everything. But truthfully, this international crime syndicate has stolen so much money from the American people over decades of time. And we're getting a look into it through the Epstein files and why it's so important that, you know, everyone needs to keep pushing their Congress people, keep phoning, keep raising this topic, put it on social media, support both Kait and Ellie, because their work is so important in keeping the
And Zeb.
spotlight on this
And Zeb, yes.
on the
Yes,
story, because
Zeb.
it's you know, without this, I don't think there's anything else that can really touch Donald Trump. I think he's deadly afraid of the Epstein files because there is stuff in there. I mean, it'll be shocking if Donald Trump is not, you know, implicated in crimes inside the Epstein files.
Yeah.
You know, it would be shocking. And if
Yeah.
it is the case, then they've probably taken it out. But, you know, there is definite evidence to suggest that Epstein and Donald Trump were heavily involved in this crime syndicate together, and that they were both making buckets of money off it and off the American people by stealing money from the American people. And that, I think, is what's in the 99%, not in 99% because a lot of video, but there's a lot of other files that are still to come out that they're desperately trying to bury. This is not an accident. This is not, as you were saying, Ellie, this is something they've been pushing to delay. They've now buried it for weeks. They've passed the deadline. Now they're looking for extra weeks. It's going to take a long time for all of it to come out, but it's only going to come out if we keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So do you guys want to say anything about that and about the importance of these files, just so people understand the value of keeping the attention on this?
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, because I think that has been, I've been trying to keep that my focus. So I didn't necessarily expect to be doing this right now. But I try really hard to.
Just a warning.
What was that?
Once you get in, it's very hard to get out. So.
It's true. It's true. And now it's like I have met so many people that have been impacted by this story in one way or another that it feels, you know, that not only is it important that we support the people who have been victimized, we've all been victimized.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Did I lose you? I think I may have lost.
I think somebody's calling her.
Well, that's a good point, though, she made there. So while someone calls her, are you back at Kait? Are you there? Can you hear us, Kait? We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Ellie's going to tell us why she thinks it's important these files come out.
Okay.
And then if you want to reconnect, Kait, we can do that. Otherwise, just hang in there. And then, well, we won't be able to speak to you unless you reconnect, I don't think. I don't know if you can hear us. So, Kait, maybe just drop out and join us again. She can't hear us.
No.
Okay, well, you go ahead and tell us what you think.
So something really cool about this entire experience is that idea of citizen journalism and an entire community of people that may otherwise be fighting about things have come together and crowdsource their skills. So somebody might be really good at tech and Adobe, and somebody might be really good at scanning documents, and somebody might be really good at interpreting legalese. I every time they give us a file dump, I immediately back it up on my Dropbox before they delete it. And so I have just been handing out that link to my Dropbox anywhere that I can find to send it to somebody. And there are so many people scanning the files and just learning how to scan them for the first time and just picking 10 pages to look through or 20 pages to look through. And there are things like, a great example is today, I was listing all of Ghislaine Maxwell's emails, and there was one that everywhere I looked, it said that it was sealed, and we just knew what the date was, but we didn't have the email. And somebody came to me and said, I found the email. She sent me the link. I dug in the files. It was legitimate, and we had the email. And so it was like, it's amazing. Yeah. And I think the government and the DOJ was relying so heavily on us being unintelligent and being like this classic, MAGA voter that voted without any knowledge of what they were voting for. They were so hoping that that's how we would deal with the Epstein files. And when we all of a sudden became this bipartisan group of all different levels of education and experience and skill, and we said, no, we are going to look into these things, all of a sudden they have millions of investigators looking at these files outside the DOJ that they didn't expect. They expected it to be like that first dump of 30,000 files that very few people looked at, however, a year and a half ago. And now all of a sudden they can't do that anymore. Everybody is looking at every single page, creating search engines for these pages, creating, email search documents. They did not expect us to actually do that. They expected us to just trust that they had investigated it and say, oh, we didn't find anything, which is what Pam Bondi sent us last February, right? To document this, and there's nothing there.
And there's lots there, as you know. That's really interesting that you got that experience. That's certainly been my experience on the story, and all the way back to, way too long now. I'm still trying to find one document that maybe your community can help me find, which is about liquid funding. And I want to know what mortgage-backed securities liquid funding held. Now, this was Bear Stearns had a lot of liquid funding in there, in mortgage-backed securities inside liquid funding, but we don't know exactly what those entities are. And I'd be really interested to know if someone's casinos were in there, because we know someone who owned casinos. Just asking for a friend. So there you go. So that'll be interesting. This is so great having you guys on together, because I feel like it's like a great puzzle that we're all putting together. Kait, you didn't finish the thought that you said. You want to finish what you were saying about the importance of these files, if you remember? If not,
yeah. Are you able to hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that I just think that it's important because not only have people been victimized, all of us have at this point, and if we don't hold them accountable to not only release everything, but for what's inside of them, I mean, I'm not really sure what else we have. It's not going to get better for us. So even if we don't have the power to make it happen, I think being loud and pointing out that we see this is really important.
Yeah, I think that's very true. This is a criminal syndicate that installed Donald Trump into the White House. I'm confident I can say that.
Yeah.
That is who is trying to take us off a cliff right now into World War III. That is someone who is, warmongering with NATO. That is a man who's trying to take over Greenland. If you're trying to connect the dots of where we're going, this is a really malign, evil guy who is not interested in the well-being of any human being on Earth, and his real interest is to profit off every bit of his business that he can. And his business right now is the U.S. presidency, and the cryptocurrency thing that is coming is just another example of this. This criminal syndicate's attempt to steal money from Americans, keep Americans poverty-stricken, even though they're the richest country in the world, while they continue to profit take off all of this. And that sounds complex and it sounds hard to understand, but it just is what it is. But the way you're saying it is absolutely right, that we are in we're all victims of this syndicate, and Epstein's files are a window into all those crimes, which is why they're trying to bury them and why we have to try push that they come out. Ellie Leonard, from the Panicked writer, now very not well paid, but certainly paid, which is good. You're doing so well. I'm really impressed by everything you've been doing. Do you want to say anything else about what you've got coming up, or anything you want to talk about?
First, I would say everybody needs to go out and subscribe to Narativ and go read The Heist. And Zev has 1.5 books out. The second one is being filled in weekly, and it's been like a college education for me, because I think I'm one side of the brain covering this Epstein story, and you've been the other side of the brain. And so when I read your stuff, it kind of clicks and makes sense and puts everything together. Now that Kait's here, that's an extra third layer, so that's very helpful for me. But
actually really cool.
Everybody go out and subscribe to Zev's Heist, and go out and subscribe to Kait Justice, and let's get this show on the road.
I loved it this week when I think it was early this week, you posted and you said, I'm going to wake up and pay it forward early. And
it was
you said
so
something
nice.
really nice about Kait, and then you pushed her site, which is so nice to do, and incredible and generous. And And Kate, tell people what they can find on your Substack.
So it's been a lot of deep dives into the Epstein files, but ultimately what I do is take you through the documents and raise the questions, and then I try to always end everything I do with the questions that I have and how we can get them answered and what we do about that. I try to promote action, I try to give us something we can do. And then, like I said, the other thing I'm working on is called the motherhood heist. And it originally was going to be a book I was going to write, but I feel like this is a good platform for me to deliver it in pieces. So that's been fun.
Everyone should subscribe to Kait Justice and Ellie Leonard and narrative.org, because I know Ellie's going to say it if I don't say it.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here tonight. I think we should do this again. It's really interesting comparing
Yeah.
notes
Yeah, I would
and
love to.
cross-referencing. So we'll definitely do it again. And thank you at home for being here on Narrative for this very special edition. Thanks, guys. Have a good night, and we'll see you again
See you
soon.
later.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Night.